Welcome to Ask Nelda Almost Anything from Facebook Live and Zoom. And our special guest tonight is Kayla Andrade. Welcome, Kayla.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
We're pretty glad that you stayed up to this very late hour. Kayla has 4 kids and she runs a full-time business and does a million networking things. I'll tell you a little bit of her bio in a second. She's a force to be reckoned with, needless to say, but I'm really amazed that she's awake at this late hour with 4 kids in business. So thanks again for joining us, Kayla.
Thank you. I had coffee. So if I'm a little all over the place, I had a nice medium cup of coffee to get me through this.
So my name is Nelda Schulte, and this is my husband, Gil Donkersgood.
Hello.
And we used to run a property management business, but throughout all of this, we're property investors. And the reason I started my online business, neldaschulte.com, is because I want to help landlords and investors with the foundation of their landlording business so that they have a profitable business and they don't step in some of the big landmines that I stepped in. I made a ton of mistakes when I started. You don't have to recreate the wheel. That's why I started my website, and that's why I'm bringing on all these fantastic people like Kayla. So that's basically in a nutshell why I do what I do. And now I'm going to introduce Kayla. Kayla Andrade is the founder of Ontario Landlords Watch. It's a group that provides supportive services involving the rental housing market, the RTA and the landlord and tenant board legislation. And her group fights for the rights of landlords, good tenants, and the heavily burdened taxpayer. And she does this by meeting elected officials, taxpayers, landlords, and tenants to discuss solutions to the housing crisis. And by the way, Kayla bought her first property at the ripe old age of 18. She now owns 18 doors in total. And so she's a kind of a young whiz. It's great to meet young investors who continue to invest over time and who become only more savvy and raise the bar for all of us. So we are thrilled to have you, Kayla. Thank you again for joining us.
Oh my goodness. Wait, talk about like, you got me blushing on the screen.
So Kayla, I'd like you to tell us first a little bit about Ontario Landlords Watch, because this is such a great group for anybody in Ontario to know about, and tell us why.
Yeah, I'll give you a little bit of background of how it got started. Just because I was a landlord of a 5-plex and they were all individually metered. And my husband was approached by a candidate that was running in the election and said, hey, I just want to let you guys know that the city could pass a policy that would make you responsible for your tenants' delinquent utility bills. So my husband came home, he told me about it. I started to understand what bylaws and policies were all about, how to get involved, how to stop it from making me responsible for my tenants' delinquent utility bills. And got a real deep understanding of how heavily involved municipal, regional, provincial, and even federal government is so heavily involved in the real estate industry. And realizing that there wasn't a lot of support for the landlords or property managers or even realtors. So we end up having to pool ourselves together through meeting to discuss the water billing and to do a petition. And through that, we congregated on Facebook just so that when something big is going to happen, we want to be able to get that news out there so we can start teaching more landlords on how they could be involved and how they can become advocates themselves, not just having like one head honcho going to the government and trying to lobby for the fairness of the housing community, but to create more. So through our Facebook group, we discuss the issues with the Residential and Tenancy Act and the Landlord and Tenant Board in Ontario. And then we get into the concept of helping landlords out with their day-to-day management of a tenant. So if they have a question or they want to know which way to proceed, and also asking for guidance, what forms they should be looking at the Landlord and Tenant Board, or connect them to different products and services throughout the province. And a great way is to build that network. Anyone's in real estate, you need a network. So you create that sense of community that you are a part of, and you grow yourself as an investor, and also, hopefully a future advocate as well. So that's how Ontario Landlords Watch got started, based on just a water billing policy in 2010. And now it's 2021, and we're still doing our networking within the group, our Facebook Lives. We have conferences, and we have a big fight ahead of us now. And I think this is why I'm delighted to be here to talk to your members about what's happening here in Ontario, because it's happening all over the place in different provinces. So you really want to be prepared as a community. And I love how you're providing the education, Nelda, because education is key to running a very successful real estate business.
So tell me what the result was of the delinquent water bill that you lobbied against. What happened with that?
So we end up having it, we had a deposit put in place for landlords. It was up to like $400. The city had another secret meeting, very quick meeting, where they were able to remove that deposit because they found it very hard onto tenants. And it's now been in effect for 10 years here in Cambridge. And also it did go to other municipalities as well. But now after 10 years, I think they're now feeling that domino effect of the water billing, where they're losing their supply of housing, or they can't encourage more of a supply of housing. And they also have a concept where tenants are now getting evicted out of their home because of unable to pay a water bill.
Oh,
so they're starting to look at different ways as a community to gather to say, how can we build supply? And I'm lucky to have my voice to be sitting on the Affordable Housing and Homelessness Subcommittee of City of Cambridge to give them investor advice, as well as, you know, get to hear what their thinking process is to make sure that they see the bigger picture than just something that it might go through and it might build supply.
Okay. So the end result of that was landlords did not get charged with the delinquent tenant water bills, but now it's kind of flipped over in a kind of a bad way for tenants. So now you kind of have to sort of balance the scale. Am I understanding that correctly?
Exactly. And now because they see that domino effect, we're now again working with the regions, the cities to say, listen, maybe we should relook at this again as council to see what is more important, the water billing or people in their homes.
Right. Yeah. That's a very important issue. And I'm glad that you're there and to talk to the government officials, because they only see it from their standpoint. But any of my experiences dealing with, levels of government is they get very stuck and entrenched in their own way of thinking. And that's why they need people like us. But I mean, this is why I'm so encouraged with what you do, because you are a citizen, you are a landlord. You were at what, 18 or 20 or something when you decided, hey, let's lobby. You did.
Yeah.
Single individual young woman, bunch of kids, but I don't really like the way this is shaken down here. I'm going to change it and I'm going to get people on board with me. And you did it. So whenever people are like, oh, we can't do anything about it, you can't, because look what Kayla did.
And when you think about it, like I look at the pictures and who I've met with through over the years and the networking that we've done. And I never really quite looked at when I started and how young I was and where I am today with the group, because we've done everything from, you know, bringing the community together, but we also had petitions happening. We spoke to lawyers, you know, we know that the good way of trying to do this is being heavily involved. And if I can teach people to do what I do, mission accomplished.
Yeah, that's great. Who is it with? I think it was Eleanor Roosevelt said, never underestimate the power of one person to change society. In fact, she says that's all we have is the power of that one person to change society. So, you know, whenever people say, my vote isn't going to mean anything, it sure does. It sure does mean something. So we landlords do have to band together. And just for me doing kind of an overview of resources for each province in Canada, I haven't worked my way through all 10 provinces yet, but Alberta is kind of top heavy in landlord support. BC is top heavy in tenant support.
I think Ontario is as well, by my understanding.
So you need people in there to balance the scales. Because because otherwise it can be really bad for landlords or really bad for tenants, and it needs to be as fair as possible. I mean, everyone's going to ask you what's fair, but
there's bad actors on both sides, right?
Yeah.
So you got to make sure that whatever you do is trying to deal with the bad actors, but not punishing the people who are just in business, you know, because we are all ultimately in business. Business is not necessarily just giving things away to everybody.
The government, taxpayers, we cannot afford to keep building, managing, maintaining, and subsidizing government housing. It's not going to be a one size fits all. We know we have tenants with very complicated needs, but there needs to be a partnership that is equal and fair on all sides, from the city, the tenants, and the landlords. Because right now they need small landlords, and the
Yep.
landlords are looking at, different rules and procedures that they have to follow, and how a tenant can really walk away with a lot of money if
Yeah.
landlord does not know the rules in that province in order to keep investing. And you keep taking away from landlords, if from landlord licensing or property management fee, or they have, water billing, and you have the fees to fight a tenant that is trying to abuse and not pay rent. That's all taken away from the investor. So they're not going to be able to have funds to continue to keep investing.
And headaches too.
Yeah, after a while, people are going to say, if it's this much hassle for me to be in a business, why bother? If they're going to make it that difficult for me. So governments have to realize that they need to support businesses. I used to work for Calgary Economic Development, and my job was to go out and recruit all these businesses into a program we had for youth. And whenever I came in, people always thought I was a municipal employee, and they gave me a real earful about the taxes that they got charged as businesses, how difficult the bylaw officers made it for them. They'd say, oh, I think you need a fan right there, and it's going to be another $50,000. You just got someone who was a petty tyrant trying to make their lives difficult for them, and assuming because they ran a business, they were mega wealthy and they should be punished. So, I heard the story so many times from business people that it made me very sad. And then at the very end, I'd have to back up and say, okay, we're not the city. We're at arm's length with the city. But thanks for sharing your story with me. And I totally sympathize. And I wish there was something I could do in my role. But, at that time I couldn't. But as individuals, we can. We certainly can.
I built a house, and my stories are horrendous as well. Just inspections and occupancy permits and all this stuff, and how difficult they made all that, just because they're sitting in their little castle trying to rule the world.
And our leader right now is really trying to encourage secondary suites. The municipalities are making the rules and the procedures regarding secondary suites. It takes forever just to get a thought to the piece of paper to actually have it as a in-law. So it's kind of difficult to see. I understand you got to do it for safety reasons, but we have a housing crisis right across Canada. Yeah. It's about getting people off the streets. It's about getting that supply up. But they've had many government programs that try to encourage landlords to get involved with them as a city. But you make it too difficult for just to get the permit down to how to manage the tenant and how to get rid of a tenant.
Calgary had a, what do they call that?
They had an incentive for legalizing.
Yeah, they actually took away any punishment for illegal suites. Said, bring yourselves up. We're going to relax the rules and make it a lot easier for everybody to get. So we took advantage. Our suite is now legal. And this is one of those rare cases where you actually have friendly civil servants who, and in the planning department, which is really unusual, they were super helpful. They approved everything.
They jumped through hoops to make sure I understood things, because I find a lot of times when you're going through those processes, they're very cryptic and you can't understand. I've got a master's degree. I couldn't understand the application for it. And I read it through. I thought there are terms here that I can't find. It's not written in plain language. And I had to call somebody and say, what does this mean? What do I actually need to do? Oh, don't bother with that. Do this. So anyway, I'm going to go off on a tangent here, but the long and the short of it was the Calgary people were excellent.
Yep.
Excellent to deal with. We got our suite legalized fairly quickly, and it only cost us about $2,500, which was mega cheap.
And that includes upgrading the smoke detectors, and putting in a sprinkler system. And it was, most of what we had to do was just building. It wasn't fees and licenses and stuff.
Yeah, so that was great.
Me jealous again. Stop making me jealous, because it's.
Jealous for long, because I was also trying to legalize my Fort McMurray suite, and they made it so difficult for me. It took about 6 months for me to get through all the channels to realize that it would cost me about $25,000 to legalize my downstairs suite. And I said, forget it. I just don't have $25,000 to pour into my Fort Mac property. So I said, I'll legalize, or I'll do a basement development permit. And even that was difficult to get through. I had to call people and say, what does this mean? What does that mean? What do I need to do? I can't get through on the system. People don't get back to you. And then you end up talking to an engineer who doesn't understand what you as a person who's not an engineer needs to know to get the permit
In
completed
English.
in English. So I found that frustrating, that process extremely frustrating. So I finally navigated my way through, and we're going to do an inspection at some point in the near future. But don't be jealous, because completely different experience a little farther up north. So anyway, I'd like you to talk about the RTA in Ontario, because the Residential Tenancies Act is a landlord tenant act that governs rental properties in Canada. They're called different things in different provinces, and they all have specific rules. And maybe Kayla, you can do kind of an overview of what you think is most important for people to know about the Ontario RTA.
Definitely understanding that the RTA is probably thicker than the Bible. It's going to be based on, the most common issues and what we do to address that. So number one, it's, we talked about, the way that everything is, it's very unfair, but we look at what landlords want to do just to move in for their own property, right? The rules and the regulations of giving tenants notice, a tenant can still fight that 60-day notice and be brought to the landlord and tenant board, and where it could take months in order to get in front of an adjudicator. And being in front of that adjudicator, they can, delay, refuse, or grant that eviction. But it's a place for both parties to come to an adjudicator and try to vouch that the landlord is lying. They don't want to move into the place. That's from the tenant side. And the landlords are like, I became divorced. I need this place for my 3 kids. This tenant hasn't paid me in, X amount of years and months. And I need my house back. And it all depends. If your paperwork is not tip-top shape, that could be thrown out at the landlord and tenant board. If you put you forgot the unit number, if you missed a calculation based on your non-payment of rent, or if you didn't sign your affidavits, or the homeowner didn't sign the affidavits. A lot of loopholes are there for tenants to poke and pry in order to stay longer into people's rental units without even having to pay $1 for rent.
I hate that.
And there was never any repercussion, for people when they do that. But it is a process where more and more landlords are just learning about the products and the tools. But the landlord and tenant board and the RTA, and how they have to write it, the RTA, the way it is, and then it goes over to the landlord and tenant board and to their rules and procedures. And I think we have too many hands in the cookie jar. But for the RTA in itself, it's that it's a problem, but a lot of our issues in Ontario, I think, are from the landlord and tenant board, and the delays and the process that's in place. So when you're investing into this province, you really got to know the proper network in order to get the proper tenants into that unit, so you don't have to go through that channel. But fact remains, landlords are starting to get creative, or they are just doing cash for keys. And that used to be a very secretive thing, like just give them the next month's rent and they leave. And well, the RTA created the policy that we had to reimburse tenants 1 month's rent if we want to take that unit over for the landlord's personal use. So, and then down to the renovations. If you want to evict a tenant for renovations, you have to offer it back to the tenant at the same rate.
Oh.
So, and our yearly leases in Ontario versus monthly, everyone thinks yearly are great, but a lot of people says that it kind of can restrict you based on when you want to move into that rental unit, you have to wait for that 1-year term to be done versus the month-to-month process of evicting someone for taking it over for their own personal use.
That's a big difference between Ontario. Like the things you were just talking about right now are very different in Ontario than they are in Alberta.
100. You guys have like one sheet of paper. We have like every alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Like there's so much, just for every issue, you have a piece of paper.
Out of curiosity though, in BC, when a fixed lease ends
Ontario.
in BC, it automatically rolls into a periodic lease.
A month to month, yeah.
Is that the same case in Ontario, or at the end of a lease, can you say we're done?
No, so after a yearly lease, it automatically goes month to month. But even after the yearly lease, there's nothing you can do anyways.
No.
You can't say, the relationships is done. We can't say, here's your $400 rent increase. It's 1.2% for 2022. And we didn't get one last year.
BC.
Yeah.
That makes Ontario, that makes BC or Alberta a much more attractive place.
Yeah, because we don't have any controls on rent. You can charge whatever you like. And we have fixed term leases, and I actually don't do periodic leases. I have one periodic lease, but he's been with us for 5 years, so we're not worried about him. But all of our other leases are fixed term. And at the end of a fixed term, you can just say goodbye. You don't have to give anybody any notice. I can give them notice and say, I'm not renewing your lease, and they have nothing to say about it. So totally different than Ontario.
We even have a standard lease that we have to have our tenants fill out. You can have addendums and they have to go with the Residential Intensity Act, but you have that standard lease. And you would think, with that standard lease, there would be a nice difference between fixed term and month to month, where you can say, hey, you've been living here a year, it's a business relationship, we want to continue, or no, these are your options, right? So, but again, it's coming down to knowing that the government needs to make these changes, but how do you make these changes where you don't have every tenant activist or every NDP elected official, jumping down someone's neck? And it's almost like political suicide for them to make the changes that are needed in order for the betterment of the taxpayers, the tenants, and the landlords. Because really deep down, the tenants are getting hurt by the way that the government is treating our tenants. We can go to the landlord and tenant board and we pay $186 for a filing fee. And yes, it's the landlord and they can afford it. But then when you look at the tenant filing fee, it's $53, or they can have that fee waived.
Oh.
But if the landlord wins, who's going to pay that $186? It's going to be the tenants. So, by having other provinces and getting to know of other provinces, you're able to learn, take that information, bring it to the elected officials and the staff and be like, it's happening here. This is why it's being a place to invest. Let's see what we can do and implement it here, right? So I think that's where it's the education again is key, and trying to figure out what other provinces are doing and doing the footwork for the government, because they're looking in the wrong areas, but they keep looking at the developers, but they restrict their developers where, again, in a long time before they can get their shovels into the ground, just like it's a long process for the permits, so the landlords can get that rolling.
Yeah. Oh. Okay, so I'm not going to say anything more about government right now, but I'm going to ask you about what your favorite tenant screening tips are. Because tenant screening, we're really big on this. I could talk about this for days. I love this subject. I love to hear what other savvy landlords do with their tenant screening tips. So share away, Kayla.
One, it's all about your listing ad, making sure your listing for your rental unit is about describing that property, not by what you're looking for in a tenant inside of that, but just the basic of what your unit has to offer your tenants. When the tenants are calling you or messaging you and they want to set up time for a viewing, because of COVID, that application process gets pushed out right away. Sometimes they say, actually, let's just meet me at the property and we'll give you an application there. That's the beginning of, one, get your good feel on them. It's about a character check. When you get to know the people, try to be very friendly and open to them when they're coming into the place, instead of grilling them as, hey, you want this place? Are you going to trash it? Are you going to pay rent on time? Are you going to have a grow up? Do you have a dog? How about a cat? These are ways to just let them do a lot of the talking and saying, tell me about yourself. So once you're getting into getting them very comfortable with you, you can really get a deep understanding of who that person is. Just talking about, oh, do you work in town? And there's like, oh, I work here. And you start asking questions about that workplace. That's a great way for you to try to find out, do they really work there? Because you should be able to talk about what you do for work in detail, unless you work for the government, then you're going to be a little hush hush about it. And then you're going to be asking the questions, I tell someone that, Fluffy's waiting at home for me and he's so cute, and, pull up a random picture of a Chihuahua if you got to, and they're going to tell you about Bruno, and Bruno is going to be that dog that you're just like, oh, she thinks I'm okay with the pet. You're opening them up to that, and lay down your rules as a landlord. This is the place, this is my inspections, these are my rules, this is what I have to offer. If there's any communication problems, I'm here to work it out. I'm a very easygoing person, so that way they can see that we're straight to the point of what this business relationship is going to be about, and informing them that you do not tolerate any type of late payments. And this is going to set that precedent of having these good tenants understanding that you're a good landlord because you know your stuff. And then for other people, they're going to be like, hey, you're a little too much for me. And we also
questions, finding out too much stuff. Yeah, professional tenant will see that.
Mhm.
Like,
And the best thing that we can do is telling your tenants that you're reporting their monthly rental payments to Landlord Credit Bureau and Equifax. That is the number one. That's what I use that tool for, because right off the bat, you're going to have good tenants wanting that application. They want to grow their credit while they're paying rent there. And then the bad ones or the questionable ones, they may not want to be able to take that gamble.
So can you legally do that? Do you have to have anyone's permission to have them listed on the Landlord Credit Bureau?
The only consent from the legal framework is that to report a good debt, you need the tenant's consent, and they can give tenant consent through the platform. You do not need the tenant's consent nor their judgment in order to report the debt to the bureaus. And the tenants have access to that report, so they get notified, they have access, they have a way of disputing that report if they don't feel that it's practical. And they have a way to have access to that platform at all times in order to make sure that what's being reported is correct.
For people who don't know what the Landlord Credit Bureau is, maybe you could explain to them about what that is and why it's good for landlords to be a part of.
So Landlord Credit Bureau is a way for landlords to report their tenants' monthly payment history to the bureaus for past tenants and current tenants. If you wish to report past tenants, you need their name and their birth date in order to report them to the bureau. And as you report it to Landlord Credit Bureau, as it goes to Landlord Credit Bureau, because you're going to want to go into Front Lobby, and through Front Lobby, you're able to report to Landlord Credit Bureau and Equifax. So this is a great way for you to inform your tenants that this is a program that you're a part of to help them, and it really brings a value to the unit and what it has to offer. And it's also going to let them know that we're going to make sure that your behavior is good, and we can work out payment plans. Landlords if you can work out a payment plan, you don't always have to report on the first as being late. You can work out a payment plan in order to make sure that the tenants are going to be holding up their end of the bargain. So this is the game changer, as I call it, because before we never had a place where you can hold tenants accountable, and you can't have that bad landlord list. So this is about reporting good and bad debt. So if you have a tenant who says, hey, my past landlord, reported my payment history, you can see my tenancy record. That's now going to push their application to the top of the pile.
Right.
And your interesting point about them building their credit, which means when they're done renting, they might be able to get a mortgage because they've established a decent habit of paying properly.
Yeah, I've got some tenants that are excellent tenants, and they not only pay on time, they pay a week, 2 weeks, a month in advance sometimes. And her credit rating wasn't very good. They've both been divorced, and the divorce really hit them hard. But they're really good people. So she isn't very happy about her credit rating, and I'm actually quite happy that I could put her on a Landlord Credit Bureau and help her build up her credit rating, because she's such a great tenant and she really deserves to have someone cut her some slack here. So
we have to start rewarding our good tenants, especially, and we really highlighted that through the pandemic, to matter if somebody's been affected by COVID or they haven't, they did everything out of their way to make sure that they've paid rent on time. And then there was tenants who took advantage of it. So we have to see that, that should be rewarded. And I think we have to start highlighting that a landlord cannot be a landlord and a business cannot be a business unless we had customers, and our tenants are our customers. So
Yep.
Landlords need to know that you have to treat them with respect and know what to be picky on, what not to be picky on, and what to expect as normal and what not to expect as normal. But know that there's so much more education out there by just networking with individuals all over the place, just randomly on all different types of social media, in order to gain that network and that partnership, because you do need to be very connected with one another to make sure that we are not getting someone who is so abusive within the community. And that's another part of Front Lobby, is that if you see a tenancy record, you can see who that past landlord was and be able to reach out to that landlord by email. to get a bigger review on them, I guess.
You know what? You get an honest landlord, you get an honest landlord's name too, right? You don't have
verified.
Yeah,
Verified.
super sleuthing. Gil and I developed this super sleuthing method for verifying landlords' identities. We pull title searches. That's one of the things that we do. But if you don't have to do that, if it's already recorded and that tenancy is attached to that landlord's name, that certainly saves you a lot of trouble and time and verification process.
So we have a question from Samantha. How do you deny a tenant without discriminating and ending up before the Human Rights Tribunal? Can you deny on one factor alone? Well, here in Alberta, you don't actually have to give a reason for not giving a tenancy. You can just say, we won't be proceeding.
That's it. The less you say, the better in Alberta. What about Ontario?
Same thing. And Samantha, she's a fantastic paralegal in Ontario, and I've met her back in my advocacy efforts back in for landlord self-help. So we got old pictures from us together, and this is why she is a fantastic person to represent landlords, because she's been along this journey. She's been a part of this voicing of advocacy work as well through herself, and that her knowledge on how to almost prevent problems before they even happen. You know, that's what our goal is, to prevent problems before they even happen. And that's down to picking the tenant, or if you do get a difficult tenant, just know the system and know how you're supposed to talk to them, what you're supposed to say, and how you're supposed to back what you say. Everything here is evidence, from reading to pictures to video. It's so important, and it shouldn't be. I really hate the fact that it's so important like that. Like we're getting ready for court, like we're on a criminal trial.
I 100% agree with you. It is for us too. And in fact, we had one move-in inspection that probably took us 4 hours one night. The tenant couldn't come until it was some crazy time when we had a property management business. It was like 9 o'clock at night or something. And then he videotaped everything. He even went out and videotaped the eaves troughs and the siding. And I just thought, shoot me already. Because, well, he felt it was necessary. We take pictures of things, we take videos, but you're right. Now it's gotten to the point where it's so litigious, you have to absolutely document everything. And we were just talking about Samantha Glass. She has SFG Legal. It's a paralegal service in Ontario. She was on our show as well. Was a great guest. And she represents landlords and tenants in court.
And she says, by the way, that you're amazing.
So there you go. Another compliment for Kayla.
I wanted to make one more comment before we move on. Back to the how do you deny a tenant without discriminating? Yes, you don't have to give any reasons when you decide not to pursue an application, but you absolutely must be careful not to write anything into your advertising that is going to appear to be discriminatory. So I know everybody on this call right now is aware of that, or at least most people, but it's something that still deserves to be called out. Don't say women, don't say specific religion, don't say specific anything. What kind of job, all that stuff is protected by human rights. So you have to be very careful when you write your ad not to cross that line, or you can be fined.
Right. And actually, that's one of the reasons I wanted to be helping landlords with this business, because real estate mistakes are really expensive. If you buy a wrong property, you can lose your shirt. I've known people who filed for bankruptcy. Really, let's hope that no one goes there. If you make big mistakes that you were unaware of with tenants, and you get someone who's litigious, your fines in Alberta start at $5,000. They go up to $25,000. And we had a friend who was a new landlord, and he turned his property over to a not very good property management company, and they put a horrible set of tenants in there who were partying and doing crazy stuff and trashing the house. And the neighbors complained to the municipality, and they ended up shutting down the house. He was making no revenue. He had a trash property. He had to get some sort of an eviction service to get these people out of his property. And he'd been paying property management fees. So, I mean, that's an example of how, if you don't know the laws, you don't know how to manage your property manager, how to even vet your property manager, you can end up with a horrible problem on your hands and a lot of expense. So that's what we want to help people bypass. And human rights issues. When Samantha was on here, there was someone that she, I guess, had represented who was being fined $100,000 for a violation of human rights in their ads. Their ads were discriminatory. I mean, that's not something you want to get stuck with. So it's just better to kind of learn the rules first
Yes.
or defer to someone who does so that you make sure that you're staying on the right side of the law when you're doing this. So products for tenant screening. We talked about what Landlord Credit Bureau does. Front lobby, I get a little confused with that. What's the difference between front lobby and Landlord Credit Bureau? Because they're kind of intertwined, right?
Yeah, so when Landlord Credit Bureau, just came out on social media and was able to explain, by reporting and being a member of Landlord Credit Bureau, but they had other services underneath that name. One is like obviously the bureau in itself, and they had other services. So to really make sure it was very clear, they did a rebrand on the concept of that service of front lobby, where they are all going to be the services. But you have Landlord Credit Bureau being the bureau, which is obviously the bureau and reporting it to Equifax. So it's just more of the rebranding. Obviously, different products and different services are going to be able to come further with front lobby, being obviously that rebrand off of Landlord Credit Bureau.
So front lobby is the service that you input your tenant information into and whether they are paying on time.
Yep.
And then that information gets reported to the Landlord Credit Bureau, and they report it to the Equifax or TransUnion's credit.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay.
That's correct.
No, I understand it correctly. Good for me. Are there any other products for tenant screening that our members or listeners need to know about that you would like to share?
I say for right now is getting to understand that there's going to be property management software that I think everyone should be getting themselves familiar with. Just because when it comes down to the landlord and tenant board and the information that you need to provide, no matter what province you're in, you want to be organized. And I think that program does something for landlords to keep you organized and to keep all your tenants' contents in one spot. And if you can get the perks of other services that help you list your rental unit at the same time, it's about providing that hub of all these services that we absolutely need. All of our landlords, we need to look at everyone that you can connect with from different channels, different podcasts. Learn. This is the best way for us to get to know the system, but also get them to know how to work themselves into knowing MPPs and MPs and city councilors as well. And then there's other companies out there that are doing bank checks, open banking. So you want to get into understanding what open banking checks are a little bit more, but programs coming from the government, when it comes down to non-payment of rents, no matter which province you are, they usually have some type of rent relief programs. Getting to know these type of programs are a good way for you to bring that information to your tenants in order to help them come up with the funds that are needed to secure their tenancy and to also keep you paid. So getting to know about those type of programs and also just incentive programs of developments or rebates. This is something that's going to really help the investment industry, is just getting to know these type of programs that are available, just not widely advertised.
So 211 is a resource that I was thinking of when you were talking. Is that what you're thinking of? 211 across Canada? And
no, tell me more.
211 is a really good government organization that helps. It supports services for all kinds of things, including low-income housing, emergency housing, medical. It encompasses a whole variety of community and I don't even know what the word is.
There you go. That's the one that you guys will need for Alberta.
Yeah, so if you have someone who is, let's say they've fallen on hard times, they're not a bad person, they can't pay their rent, they don't know where they can live, they can dial 211. And 211 is across Canada. It's a Canada-wide government program. You can call and they can help you out. They can help your tenant out.
See, there's so much more that's out there.
Yes, well, the software, you're talking about a software program, and I just spoke to somebody this week who had a software program for people who only own a portfolio of, let's say, 10 or less properties, even 1, 2, 3 properties, and you have to start someplace. And his program is called Tenant Cube. So
Andrews,
yeah. And I went and did a demonstration, and it really looks amazing. And it keeps you, if you have 3 units or less, you can join for free.
So, wow. So you get the smaller.
Yeah. So and it tracks everything. It tracks your expenses, your maintenance. Tenants can log in. You can have notes to your maintenance people. You can pull money from the bank account every month for rent. I mean, it's really an amazing software system written by a landlord for landlords. So anyway, that's my plug for Tenant Cube because I really think it's amazing and it's free. So why not?
If you're a super large property management organization, I was using one called MI Property, which is also the Canadian built application, but I think it's more intended for the larger organizations. Although it did have a lot of applications within it, so
Yeah.
it was pretty powerful.
So these software programs make things easier for you to track and store in cloud storage, and also it makes it easier for your bookkeeper or your accountant to do your taxes at the end of the year.
Yes, if it's integrated into a GL,
Yeah.
that's great.
In
And
fact,
it's better to do it now when you're small, because once you're big, oh man, you just want to stay away and just not even bother trying to upload all the information from one program to another or from paper to another. And I think it's about welcoming technology and understanding that things need to be more hands-on with technology and having the software and having the electronic reporting of rent, and knowing that the landlord and tenant board now in Ontario is now gone digital first, not digital only, and landlords are filing online. They have a portal that they have to go to now to file their applications. There's a communications spot within that program for the landlords and the tenants to try to work out their dispute with a dispute resolution officer, and if not, now you're on the docket for waiting for a hearing. So you can see that it's all being linked to online services that are needed, and just knowing that, you know, we need more housing. You know, we want to make things, we're trying to look for tools to make things easier and trying to fight the government from making things harder. So we're playing tug of war with all parties.
and I think that's going to be a constant tug of war between government and regular mortals, because government is always complicated. So I would like to just turn this a little bit over to Christmas, because Christmas is coming up and I have some holiday tips for tenants. And I'm guessing Kayla will have a lot of them too, because she's got 18 properties. So I'm sure she has a lot of holiday tips for tenants. So I'll start with one. So ensure lighting doesn't turn into a fire hazard. So most decorative lights these days are non-heat producing, but the older ones are. So if they are, you just need to notify your tenants to just turn them off at night when they're sleeping or when they're not in the house, so that they don't catch on fire. And then keep stockings away from fireplaces so that you don't blow the place up. And then have the tenants check the smoke and the CO2 detectors to ensure that they work. So do you have a holiday tip that kind of jumps out at you that you're thinking on, you know, this is something?
I say for our landlords is making sure that you're almost doing your inspection around this time of the year and being able to check that smoke detector form, informing the tenant that you've checked it, they're not going to tamper with it, get it signed off on a piece of paper to say that it has been checked, so that if there's anything that does happen, that's the first thing you can show the fire marshal when it happens. And on your way over there to do the inspection, give your tenants a little Christmas gift.
Oh, I love that. Yes.
A gift card, or if it's a bottle of wine that they may not drink, but it's just a nice gesture. It's always nice to be able to work that relationship and work that safety mechanism into what your job is for Christmas. And just understand that you're salting and you're snow shoveling. Make sure it's cleared, my friends, and make sure you have a reputable company if you have one and they're doing their job, because that's going to save you some time and headaches for not keeping up on that portion of it.
Those are excellent tips. And then we've got another one.
Actually, but I wanted to touch on the gift first, because we also do the holiday gift. We do it for our tenants. We do it for some of our tradespeople as well.
Nice.
Tradespeople are worth their weight in gold if you get a good one.
Yep.
Everybody loves to get a gift. You're building a relationship. You're getting people on your side. I liked what you said earlier about tenants being customers. I used to be a partner in a hardware store, and if we had customers in the hardware store who pay us as much as we can expect to get from a tenant in 1 year, we would treat these people like absolute gold. They would be our best customers ever. And so you have to think about that with your tenants, especially good ones, because it's so much easier to keep a good tenant than it is to find a good tenant. So
Same with tradespeople.
yeah, absolutely.
I've got a funny story about a trades. I've got like the best handyman in the whole world ever in my Fort Mac property. He's absolutely amazing. And so I sent him a pop-up Christmas card and a really nice box of master chocolate. Chocolate. So so anyway, he called me and he said, by the way, thank you. I got the card and I got the chocolates. I said, oh, did you like them? He said, I ate them all in 5 minutes. I had one. They were so good. I ate the whole box. I didn't share any with my wife.
Okay, so the next point we have here is if your tenants plan to leave for a holiday vacation, make sure they notify you of the dates, lock all the windows and doors, set alarms, lights, timers, and have someone check in regularly to ensure safety and to satisfy the property insurance provider. We have actually had a situation where some people went to Cuba for February, furnace died, whole house froze, nobody went in and checked. We were very lucky, there wasn't any damage, but as I said, we were very lucky. They called me when they got back from Cuba. I went in the house. It was cold. It was so cold. The toilets were frozen. Everything, like, it was bad. Again, we got lucky because there wasn't any damage, but technically it would have been on the tenant because they're supposed to have someone checking on the property. Again, they got lucky. We all got lucky. But this is one thing you want to be absolutely sure of.
Then I'm also going to say locks, because a lot of times I switched all my properties to keyless entries because it happened more than one time when somebody went away on a vacation or they went home for Christmas or whatever, especially the ones who lived in Fort Mac. And they'd call me and they'd say, Nelda, I lost my key. Can you let me in? And I'd be, well, I'm in Montreal or I'm in the United States right now, so I'm not sure how I can let you in. So I switched everything to a keyless entry. So all they have to do is put in an access code, or they can log in with their phone, and then they don't have to worry if they lost their key. And I don't have to worry about how to tell them how to break into the house.
Actually, keyless is really good because you can change them at a moment's notice. So yeah, and the other thing is closing the curtains, or at least making sure that if there's gifts and that sort of thing, they're not going to be visible from outside so that people won't be tempted to break in and steal stuff.
Yeah, you don't want any extra Santa helpers or bad Santa helpers. Check the plumbing and the hot water tank and the furnace, because I always used to dread New Year's Eve and Christmas Eve, because invariably when we had a property management business, we would always get calls on both those dates. My furnace isn't working, my hot water tank isn't working. And as part of the minimum housing and health standards, this is considered an emergency and you can't put this off. So I would be on the phone all night. Everybody would having a nice dinner, having a nice drink, enjoying company. And I'd be trying to locate somebody who could come in and fix their furnace or their hot water tank, paying 3 times more money for the services. So if you check those types of things, get them serviced ahead of time, then you can probably enjoy your Christmas dinner and your New Year's out without talking to tenants on the phone or plumbers or HVAC people.
Become a landlord, they said. It would be fun, they say.
Why is it always on like Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve? How does the furnaces and how do they all know what day it is?
Yeah, why did they choose those particular holidays? And then our sewage backed up one Christmas Eve as well. And then it backed up again on New Year's. I'm like, are you kidding me? The gods are trying to smite me. Holiday emergencies, we ended up hooking up with the restoration and disaster restoration business. So we had to sign up for a membership with them, which was perfectly fine, because if a disaster happened, there was a fire or a flood, they'd be there in minutes, and they'd be on site taking care of the issue. So we didn't have to worry about running around trying to find people who could do this. We just already had a disaster restoration company in place in case of any emergencies, and our tenants had their numbers as well. So, and we specified, we documented, this is an emergency. These things are emergencies. Right. These things are maintenance. Please do not call the disaster recovery for that one.
I'm surprised we don't have to draw pictures these days, not just having the notes. It's like, this is emergency.
I've got a phone light bulb. Anyway, yeah, so we just had to, but making sure that the tenants are aware of that means that if you're away for whatever reason and there's an emergency, someone will get to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then holiday guests, because people like to have people over. I mean, you want to have your loved ones over. I totally get that. Good opportunity to offer Santa's helpers a friendly reminder to take the same good care of the property that the tenants do. And if you have people staying longer than the required amount of time for guests on the lease, then you can send a friendly reminder to your tenants about that. Doesn't usually happen to us over Christmas. Hasn't usually happened with unwelcome guests or pets or whatever over Christmas.
Doesn't
But,
typically. No.
but you know, it's always good to remind people. And I think that's it for our holiday tips. Do you have any other holiday tips? I mean, it looks like you're thinking, did they forget this? Did they?
I'm actually covering everything from holidays because I was just doing my 12 days of baking and getting the house prepped and getting our units ready to go for the winter to make sure that we're not getting those pesky little calls on Christmas Eve, because we have a lot more to run to.
Yes.
Take your present to go.
What do you do to prepare for Christmas for your tenants so that you can have a relaxing holiday?
What you just said, this is about preventing problems from happening and doing the checks and making sure you get that information out to your tenants on a email or a text message, informing them, hey, just it's the winter season, just want to let you know. But again, you want to go over, drop it off, and then give them a treat with it, because it honestly builds that relationship between the landlord and the tenant, especially in the magic of Christmas or the magic of the holidays. So you really want to, make sure that you're on top of, not being shy to be around your unit and to making sure you're keeping an eye on it. Sometimes landlords have a problem like, oh, they pay the rent on time. I had no issues. They never called me for anything, so I didn't bother going over. Well, now you've seen what your house was left like and why they didn't want you over. You really want to, definitely make that appearance when you're doing your checks on your smoke detectors and utilizing that Christmas time in order to do that check, as well as, showing your gratitude for that in particular tenant, because we can talk about the bad ones and we can talk about how bad the system are. But really, for me, I've been a landlord for quite some time. And I've only had one difficult tenant that we had to deal with. And that was like a good tenants gone bad, where there was a separation and I got left with the husband. I'm like, damn it. Like, why you leave me the man? I got my own man to deal with yours. And it still took like 7 months with me knowing the system. It took 7 months to evict that tenant. And, you're out $7,000 of whatnot with rent. And that's the part where you got the birth date, you got the name, report it to front lobby, get it to the bureau so that you can warn other landlords as they do their credit checks, and informing them of, look at these trade lines. I don't think landlords look at the score or the trade lines. They just look at the score and they see the A or the B and they go on it. Like, I think they really need to see that a tenant could be going downhill quicker than what their current score is if no one's been reporting it. So you really want to look at those trade lines and pick yourself a great tenant so that without a doubt that they're going to take care of that property, and it's going to make it worth it for you to want to treat them as a good customer, because your business is only going to be as good as you are as a leader and treating your tenants with respect.
So your tenants know who you are then. They know you.
Yeah, they have to know me.
I ask you this, which sounds like an obvious question, but we have had clients who had, $10 million of properties, and one of them did not want the tenants to know his identity. So he would be around the properties, but he even had an email with a different last name because he didn't want them to know that he owned the property.
Yeah.
Because when you go on site, then, whatever, they would be requesting other stuff or whatever. So he just wanted to keep his identity secret at all times.
By the same token, he had every reason to. The properties were not high-end properties by any stretch. We walked into one, there was this big bucket in the middle of the floor catching the rainwater coming through the roof. So, yeah.
See, things like that, they do it probably for that matter, because when you know that you're speaking to a landlord, you're going to let it all loose. This is what's going wrong. This is what needs to be done. This is what needs to be done. But when you feel that you're just speaking to a laborer or maintenance guy or just the property manager, there is a different relationship that the tenant will have with that in particular person. And two, a lot of landlords want to be secretive because, sometimes when tenants, if you get a bad tenant, they could want to, get to know more about that in particular landlord, know that there's money, knowing that if they did slip and fall, they can indeed get money from, like, there's so many evil people out there that you need to be prepared for. It's not that we're completely thinking everyone's bad, but we do have to know there is con artists out there and people who are fraudulently abusing multiple different systems, and we have to be prepared for them and know the warning signs.
But you let them see your identity. You let your tenants know who you are and they know.
Yeah,
you.
we always call it like good cop, bad cop. You know, you get the husband going in, he's the good cop. And then when he's losing his battle like he does with the kids, then I step in.
Not bad cop. Yeah. Well, I guess to each their own. It depends on what your experiences are. And I guess it only takes one scary experience to want to hide your identity, but it's totally up to you. So yeah, anyway, all that aside, we talked about the RTA. We talked about the Ontario Landlords Watch, which is a really excellent organization to join if you need some advocacy or you want to join because you want to become an advocate and work on legislation. Absolutely do that. We talked about the Landlord Tenant Board in Ontario, Kayla's tenant screening tips, products for tenant screening, and dealing with tenant disputes. You go to the Ontario, I forget the acronym for it. Ontario, is it the Landlords Board?
Ontario,
Landlords-
yeah, the Ontario Landlord and Tenant Board.
Ontario Landlord and Tenant Board. Okay. And then lastly, we covered some Christmas tips. And the long and the short of all of this is, I also believe that there are more good tenants than bad tenants if you do a good screening process. If you just take any and everybody, then really you're kind of setting yourself up for abuse. But if you really screen, most of the time you're going to get good tenants. And
We get a lot of people who say, we don't screen, we don't do credit checks, we don't call references. And yeah, I mean,
Get that one to get in to change their entire system.
yep, absolutely. We tell people learn from our mistakes because we've made those mistakes
yeah.
ourselves.
1099 a check. That's all. 1099 could cost you 20, 30,000
Easy.
easily. And that's just like missed rent for us in Ontario. So I can only imagine from damages and the amount of time your unit's off the market
Yep.
by having to get the renos done and the lost rent there. So it's not worth the risk. Just do the check, make sure that you're taking, all the precautions and looking at everything, because you're handing over a lot of money to a tenant
Yep.
when you give them that keys, and you're pretty much almost signing over your rights. We talk about how difficult it is to take possession of your house back for you to even move in. So you really need to make sure that, and you know what, it sucks that we have to do it this way. Everyone does deserve a home. There is people without great credit. And that's what I liked about Front Lobby, is that it can help people who do pay their rent on time. It can help them grow that credit score and show that they can at least pay their rent on time. Yes, you had a divorce. Yes, you had a bankruptcy. Let's see that tenancy record. Let's show us your payment history. And if you can share that document to me as your next potential landlord, you will be looked at a lot more than having just a score in front of my face and you showing me that you work at this job.
Yeah, makes a big difference. So yes, get your tenant screening products in place, join the Landlord Credit Bureau and Front Lobby, and network with other landlords, network within your province and within Canada so that you build your support network, because everybody needs support. We all need each other, and we can certainly have a stronger voice when we're all lobbying together as well. So thank you, Kayla, very much for joining us, for sharing your expertise. And thank you so much for the work that you do in Ontario with landlords and with tenants, and on the boards that you're on. You're really an inspiration, and I really appreciate all the work that you do. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Nelda. We're stronger together.
We are. Have yourself a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. This is our last Ask Nelda in 2021. We'll resume again in January at a date to be determined. So
Merry Christmas, happy holidays.
yes, happy holidays. Happy holidays, everyone. Good night.
Bye for now.